Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Yes. Welcome back to another edition, another episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, and with me as ever is my partner in crime, Santoki Nagilendran. Santoki, how you doing?
Yes, Mash, all good. We're about a week away from the big showdown between Australia and West Indies. So, we had to jump on a special preview podcast looking at that test series. West Indies, we secured that hard-fought, rain-affected draw against India. So we push on our march to the World Test Championship final with these two tests against Australia. And Mash, it's not just us today on the episode. We've got a special returning guest. He was one of the original guests way back in 2020 lockdown. He came on and he's been on since then. He was here for our cricket wrestling episode, which we enjoyed. And anyone who follows him on social media will know he's had a busy year following the Australian cricket team. I've got jet lag just reading his accounts of where he's been traveling to and following the team. So, Mash, without further ado, do you want to introduce our guest today?
Indeed. It is, of course, let me see what intro I can go for here. The global commentator extraordinaire, the best-selling author, the wrestling / cricket fan, the hybrid wrestling / cricket fan, let's call him Barat and his technicolored dream coat. It is, of course, Bharat Sundaresan. Let's get him on and let's get going. Bharat, how you doing?
Oh, well, I would have let you continue on for a while there, Mash. I was enjoying that. I was thinking about it. Who am I? Am I like the Brock Lesnar of this show? Or am I the Rock? Maybe not the Rock, but maybe I'm more like the territory thing, right? We're all wrestling fans, not just of this era, but we're vintage wrestling fans. And even though we didn't grow up in the 80s, none of us did. Maybe you did, Mash, a little bit. You would always hear about these territory champions, right? Like Ric Flair returning to wherever, and that's what I feel like. I am one of the originals. I was thinking about it yesterday, 4 years ago, when we did that fun episode on the East Indians of Guyana and Trinidad. That feels like a long time ago, boys. You've done so much wonderful stuff since then, and you have become the voice of West Indian cricket, for the voiceless of West Indies cricket, and I've really enjoyed your run, and I always keep a keen eye on what you guys are up to, and it's always fun.
So what we saying, Barat mentioned territories there. What is he, the Dusty Roads of the podcast then?
Do you know what? As he was saying the territories thing, I was literally trying to scan my brain as to who I. Do you know what? I reckon Barat might actually be Mick Foley, because obviously Mick Foley was Mick Foley. He was Cactus Jack. He was Dude Love. You don't know which Bharat Sundaresan you're gonna get.
I'll take that. There was, I don't know whether I've told you guys this story. One of my biggest moments of my life, I must say, is when Mick Foley did one of his speaking gigs here in Adelaide. He came on an Australia tour in 2022, and I dragged my wife along for it. And it was great fun. He does a great one-man show. And when they went, once it finished and the Q&A started, I got the biggest pop in a Mick Foley show, not because people knew who I was in that crowd anyway, but I asked him, I put my hand up, and in my introduction I said, I know I don't sound very Australian, because you had like some hardcore proper Australian sounding Australians there, and so he was like, oh, so where are you from? So I said, oh, I'm originally from India. And then Mick Foley said, oh yeah, I was taken out for some curry last night. It was between an adult toy shop and a happy ending massage parlor. And I don't know, I just thought the timing was right. I said, yeah, they do say that's where you find the best curry And boys, the place just exploded, and even Mick Foley exploded. I was like, I think I can retire now in life. I got the biggest pop in a Mick Foley one-man show. So yeah, so I am Mick Foley. There you go. I have beaten him at that once at least, Mash.
And but you know what? Before we get properly into the cricket, we know that there is definitely a subculture of cricket and wrestling fans. We of course because we even got some questions sent in to ask you about this, Barat. So we might as well get out of the way from the beginning. We had a question sent in from Will Cooling, saying, I need to actually go and find it, but if I remember off the top of my head, he said, will you be going to Perth for the Elimination Chamber? And then I think he said, who do you think will headline? Or who do you think will headline Mania? So first thing, just answer the Perth question. Will you be at Perth for the Elimination Chamber?
No, I can't risk my marriage any more than I did in 2023. So I was on the road for 7 months, and I started this year. I took a 6 a.m. flight out to Sydney on January 1st, and I've just come back. I have the whole Adelaide test build up to go, and then Brisbane, and then I have New Zealand coming up, and this elimination chamber falls right in the middle of it. Now, if I start traveling for wrestling, I might have to look for a new home. Literally, I'll be like Mick Foley. I'll be in the dungeon somewhere. So no, unfortunately, I won't be going there. Though I was just telling Santoki before we pressed record. I was in Perth for the Test match, the Pakistan Test match, and the thing with the Perth Stadium is it's a massive structure. It's got the best parts of the MCG and the Adelaide Oval and most other modern stadiums or the modern look stadiums anyway. So, but it never feels like a cricket stadium to me. That's why I've covered all 4 Test matches there, or 3 Test matches, or 4 Test matches, and you'll see the crowds don't like the stands look pretty empty. But whenever you watch Aussie rules football there, it just lights up. It's a beautiful stadium, and I think it's made for wrestling, so it'll be a great spectacle. And I saw a lot of ads and on hoardings everywhere as well. So I was semi-tempted. And oh, you know what? This would have been so cool. I just missed out on it. So the radio station I work for, so there are 3 radio stations in Australia. So one of the other radio stations, not the ABC, obviously, they almost had Rhea Ripley and Dominic Mysterio come into their box, which would have been next door to us, because those two were there promoting Elimination Chamber in Perth. But I think their flight got delayed, so they didn't come. Or you would have seen me in a picture with Rhea Ripley and Dominic Mysterio. It's weird, right? Like, you spend your whole life with all these high-profile cricketers and all of that. I've never bothered taking a selfie with anyone, but if a wrestling person turns up, I get really excited. So no, I won't be going to Perth. Long winding answer there, but yeah, I wish I was.
And Santoki, Barat didn't answer the second one, but I'll let you answer it. Lots of people listen to this episode 8 minutes in going, wait a minute, what's this episode about?
We did mention Australia once.
Furious West Indian fans turning the podcast. Like, what are these guys talking about? Santoki, who will main event WrestleMania this year? I've got it as The Rock versus Roman. I think that's the main event. I don't know if it's for the title, but I think that's the main event. What are you saying, Santoki?
Yeah, I think it has to be, unless they do a weird, because WrestleMania is like 2 nights now. Unless they do Roman Reigns against Rock and maybe one night against Cody Rhodes, I don't know. But it has to be match from a money making point of view. Rock coming back, once in a lifetime match they can mark it as against Roman Reigns to decide the quote unquote head of the table.
And Barat, your answer? Who's main event in Mania?
Oh no, Rock and Roman Reigns one night for sure. Maybe the first night I'm gonna say, and then Cody Rhodes has to be there in that the main event. Like, if not, like, to finish the story. So I don't know. I think they don't have enough time to build up a CM Punk Cody Rhodes thing. I think CM Punk Seth Rollins looks like set in stone, which makes it interesting. But I do remember listening to some wrestling podcast where they said the ideal way for Cody to finish the story could be if he beats Rock and Roman Reigns. So I don't know if that's going to work out as well. That would be quite something.
I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
But you know what? Enough of the wrestling. Let's actually turn to the real main event, which is after Pakistan turned up in Australia first as the appetizers. The real main eventers, the West Indies, have turned up. for the main course to play Australia 2 Test match series. And Santoki, I'll go to you first before we go to Barat. It's a weird one, Santoki. It's just how the Future Tours program has worked that we happen to just be going back to Australia a year after being there, which was 7 years after we'd last been. So it's a real weird state of events that has led us to come back. Obviously, going into the tour, Santoki, big news that loads of people essentially refused to go because they want to play T20s. No Brandon King, no Shea Holt, no Jason Holder, no Carl Mayers, just to name 4. Darren Bravo said he's taking a break from cricket. So that's 5 people straight away who would all be better than the players in the current side who have refused to go to Australia, which at the time we said was not, I wouldn't use the word outrageous, but because of the legacy of it being Australia and the fact that Australia are a top 3 team, it's weird, Santoki, because South Africa have caught pelters from everybody. West Indies have just gone under the radar with the RC team, and no one's cussing us out as we turned up in Australia with loads of our main players not there either. So just generally, Santoki, what's your feelings going into this Australia tour? Is there, what realistically can we even do?
Yeah, well, I think it's like you said, it's an unusual one because South Africa, there's a lot of parallels of what they've announced on their tour to New Zealand. So many players missing. I think the difference is, if we're being honest, South Africa at full strength could compete with most teams and probably win against most test sides. West Indies, the 5 players you name, Mash, even if they were in the squad, we'd be taking licks in Australia. So I think the impact of it isn't as dramatic as it is in South Africa. So, as you said, there's not been really much scrutiny about West Indies players turning down. Jason Holder, who's seen as like a stalwart of Test cricket and West Indian legacy, him missing. There's not really been much uproar about it. I feel like there's been so much going on around the world that it's kind of gone under the radar. And so I'll put it to Barat. We got a popular question. I think Sumit asked it on Twitter. What is the general perception from the Australian public about West Indies touring? Do they care? Has it got much publicity? Are people excited to see the West Indies coming?
I'll be honest, no. I'll be very brutally honest. And you know how dear West Indies cricket is to my heart as well. But I guess, like Mash said, the fact that we have 2 West Indies test tours in back-to-back years has led to that. Last year, at least, like you said, 6-7 years since they had been here, you could build that series around the whole nostalgia of, remember when the West Indies used to come, and remember when Ambrose and Dean Jones had their thing, and remember when Brian Lara made his runs, remember when it was all about remember when, and they spent, I think, all their energy with the remember whens during the Perth test and the Adelaide test, neither of which lasted more than 4 days, I don't think. Oh no, having said that, the Perth test did go to day 5. So at that point, we were really happy with this West Indies team. We were like, well, they have shown a lot of fight. But then the pink ball test in Adelaide, you knew which way this was going to go, and that's the way it went. So yeah, I mean, there was some trepidation even last year about, what do we do when they come next year? Like, what do we talk about, right, from a broadcast sense, or how do we build up that series? Like I said, last year was about, you remember the legacy of this contest, but that's done. That's been worn out last year. So now it's the focus will shift even more so on Australian cricket. And look, that's just how the culture is here. It's not that the opposition doesn't get a lot of attention, but unless it's India these days, that wasn't always the case, or it's the Ashes. I mean, the Ashes is an easy sell, right? There is always this challenge of how do you sell the opposition team. And you spoke about the South African team. I remember last summer, so even when West Indies were playing, the whole talk around that West Indies series was, okay, fine, we'll see off the West Indies, but the real challenge is the South Africans who are coming with their pace attack against our pace attack. It's pace versus pace and all of that. And then what happened? That, in fact, at some levels, that test series was less competitive than the West Indies test series, the first 2 tests in particular. So the whole focus this time was, let's hope that Pakistan do well. And to their credit, I think, even though it was 3-0, they put on a fight, right? Like after the first test in Perth, there was this fear that it'll be a repeat of last year. And look at what the broadcasters are doing. I mean, Fox had Ravi Shastri for one test. They had Harsha Bogle for the second and third test. They're already, I mean, yes, I mean they're trying to make their commentary team multicultural, but they're already looking forward to next year when India are coming. But thankfully, Pakistan did put on a fight in Melbourne and Sydney, and some new guys put their hand up, and it was not the Babar Azam show, which I think a lot of people in Australia would have preferred because they know who Babar Azam is, unlike Amir Jamal and Khurram Shehzad and Saud Shakil. So when the West Indies squad was announced, there was more resignation around Australia. Going, man, at least we knew who Jason Holder was. Kyle Mayers, we've heard about him. Darren Bravo, yes, we know he's related to Brian Lara, or Brian Lara and Darren Bravo has played a lot more cricket than a lot of these others. And it turned to like, who are these guys? I was told very clearly, Bharat, we'll be turning to you, mate. So be you prepared with your research. And I am commentating on and hosting the first 2 days of the warm-up game that starts tomorrow here in Adelaide, or tomorrow for me anyway, between West Indies and Australia A side, which also is made up of players who are not playing in the Big Bash League, right? So you have some first-class stalwarts, but a lot of guys who made their debuts in the last couple of months in the Sheffield Shield. So I think it's more resignation of like, we don't even know what to expect this time. At least last year we were like, okay, we kind of know Kemar Roach, Alzari Joseph is exciting, Jaden Seals, everybody's stocked up. So yeah, I mean there is no very obvious narrative, and at least the Pakistan series had the whole David Warner thing element to it. It started with like the Mitchell Johnson thing and half of Australia not wanting him there. It ended with rara David Warner. And yeah, as you notice, as soon as that ended, it was about now there is this whole mystery around who's going to open. Like, is it going to be Steve Smith? He's put his hand up as well. It's almost a wrestling angle that they're forcing out of this thing, right? Like, who's the third man? Who is the opener? And I think that's the big debate right now in Australia. But what happens once the opener is revealed? I don't think it's going to be like the NWO. It's not going to really kick off in that sense. It'll be more a case of okay, it is Steve Smith or Cameron Green or Marcus Harris. And then now we have to like talk about the Australia West Indies series, and it pains my heart to say this, but that's really how the lead up to this series has been and will be.
So let me just jump in here, Barat, because before Santoki and I dissect and offer up some kind of comments on some of the newer West Indian talent that's coming to play in this series, I am surprised. I mean, admittedly, the squad's not been announced. Yeah. But I'm surprised, or would be surprised, if Australia put out a full strength side, right? Now, the impression I'm getting is that's exactly what they're going to do.
Yep.
But respectfully, what is beyond guys' stat padding, and I say this as a die-hard West Indian fan, right? What is Marcus Labuschagne gaining from scoring 150 against West Indies in one of these test matches, right? Respectfully give that chance to someone else, or I'm not, and it doesn't have to be Marnus, it could be somebody else that I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So from an Australian perspective, and for West Indian fans as well, what new faces will we see? Like, will Pat Cummins rest himself, for example? Does he really need to play this series? Will they take it as a chance to introduce new players, or do you think it'll be business as usual?
No, it'll be business as usual. I think that's the cultural difference, and also the way modern day Test cricket is, isn't it, Mash? Like when it comes to India, England, and Australia, they can just it is still. It means a lot to them to play Test cricket, and because they can afford to do that as well, right? I mean, the fact is that a lot of people criticize Shaheen Shah Afridi for stepping out or skipping the Sydney Test because he wanted to be ready for the T20 series, which he's captaining, and then in a busy T20 year. But then on the other hand, you have Mitchell Starc, who, right, full credit to him, he missed 8 years of IPL cricket and now has gone for some insane amount of money. But he can afford to do that because he's from Australia. And the same goes for cricketers from England. Their central contracts, or what it's worth to play a test match, not just in terms of legacy, but also in terms of remuneration, is what dictates everything, right, in today's day and age. So if what you say does happen, if one of them does rest themselves, there'll be an uproar in Australia. How can you miss a test match in the baggy green? And that's just how it is culturally. So I don't even think they look at it from that perspective of stat padding, but which we saw did happen last year when Marnus made 500 runs against them in 2 test matches. It was pretty incredible. But for them it's just another test in for Australia, another test in the baggy green. As far as Pat Cummins goes, I don't think he likes missing matches. You saw him during the World Cup. He rarely rests himself. Then you have Josh Hazlewood, who missed 2 major test summers of cricket because of injury. So he played only, I think, 3 tests over the last 2 summers. So he's not going to miss out. And Mitchell Stark's having a great run in test cricket. And Nathan Lyon's coming back from that major injury in the Ashes, and he wants to power on towards 700 test wickets, I guess. So the bowling attack's not going to rest themselves. The batting lineup, I guess the switch could be Steve Smith as opener and Cameron Green at number 4, which, I mean, it's still the same players, but it'll be something different. Though, having said that, the only thing I can see happening is if they get Lance Morris in. If not for this test, then maybe at the Gabba, because they want to take a look at him before, say, the New Zealand series. But I think the culture is different here in Australia. Like they don't rest players in that sense, and even when you hear the selectors talk or even the players talk, it's more about like, okay, you might be ready to break into the side, but you just have to wait your turn. And that's how the history is, right? They'll tell you about Mike Hussey and Adam Gilchrist and so many others, Usman Khawaja, who had to really wait their turn before they came in. And what is that thing that Justin Langer always says? It's like a nightclub. It's tougher to get out than to get in. If that makes sense.
Listen, Santolki, Barat's just told us that Australia are bringing the whole corporate ministry to lick us down.
Pretty much, yes, yeah. They're all there, man. Like all with their titles, yeah.
So Santolki, what do we do in response to that?
This is the thing, like, if you look, even if we look at last year's our batting lineup against Australia, you had Bonner, Blackwood, Mayers, Holder, some sort of experience in Test cricket. Now, Mash, I think we agreed. Going into this Australia first test, our top 5 is most likely going to be obviously Chanderpaul and Brathwaite at the top. Then you've got Kirk, Sanjay, McKenzie. I don't know if his parents were fans of Sanjay Manjrekar or something, but
yeah, I was intrigued by that. Yeah.
Alec Afanase, and then probably Mash Kavem Hodge at 5. You'd imagine. So if you're looking at that, just the lack of experience in that middle order between McKenzie, Afanase, and Hodge, it just doesn't, facing up against Cummins, Hazelwood, Stark. It just seems like it's going to be a recipe for disaster. And admittedly, last year against Australia, we didn't perform too bad with the bat. Yeah. I know Brathwaite hit a century, we hit 300. The problem was taking wickets. We struggled to take wickets. So now you've got a combination of an inexperienced batting lineup and a weaker bowling unit. The recipe's not there. Basically, put it this way. If West Indies manage to secure a draw, Barat, you're going to have to write a sequel to Miracle Makers. It's going to be Miracle Makers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they even if they come close, if there's a close test match, I think that calls for a book. And look, it's just a fact of life. You're right? Like, I mean, though, having said that, last year you kind of had seen a bit of Bonner and you'd seen a lot of Blackwood in Test cricket. And I think Sharma Brooks was in the side. And then you had Devon Thomas. I remember saying this last year. Their best bowler was a wicketkeeper turned bowler. You remember Devon Thomas was unplayable in some of his spells, and we all know what happened to Devon Thomas since. And their best batter was their best bowler at one point, because Craig Brathwaite was bowling really well, and he was the one scoring runs. So that was a sad reality. I remember a spell where Alzari Joseph bowled okay. But again, going back to the whole narrative around the series, right? Like, he bowled okay, but he bowled a couple of bouncers that Manas had a duck under. And immediately the whole focus shifted on, like, this is the future of West Indies cricket. And it's sad, right? It's always broken my heart whenever people see, like, some kid hit 2 boundaries and they say, all right, West Indies, it's the future of West Indies cricket is secure, boss. The next 10 years, we're going to dominate cricket. It doesn't come from people like us, but generally people outside the Caribbean or people who are not Caribbean fans or West Indian fans. fans. And it's going to be the same. I mean, Shamar Joseph, we spoke about him off air, Santok. He has a great backstory. And, it will get milked, right? Like, it is a tremendous story. And we saw that with Amir Jamal as well, who, to his credit, was outstanding. 2 6-wicket hauls, nearly made 100, nearly won Pakistan a test match. But his backstory of being this guy who came to Sydney with nothing 8 years ago, and here he is at the SCG. So I think that kind of narrative will do the rounds. And I've been working my backside off in trying to find out more about these guys, watching their 30-minute long interviews on YouTube, and just to get some sort of a background on Akeem Jordan and Alec Athenes and everybody else. So they all seem to say the right things. They always do, right? Like, I bleed and breathe West Indies cricket, Test cricket, and all of that. But it's not going to be easy against a fired up Australian side as well. Like, they just seem to. I mean, you saw Pat Cummins in that series, you saw Josh Hazelwood in that series. So they unlike even say last year, where I think. Yes, the focus was on the home summer, but they were already looking forward to what was to come with the India tour, the Ashes, and the World Cup, and all of that. This year they're fresher. They can go. I'm sorry to say this match, but they can go even like all out in these 2 Test matches because they have a big break between now and New Zealand, and they don't play too much Test cricket this year as compared to last year. So it's not just the corporate ministry, but it's also the corporate ministry, in their best form. It's Farouk, but the Farouk that was in the Nation of Domination and in the corporate ministry and who would become the APA all rolled into one. Like, I don't know which one of them is Farouk, but that's what you're up against as a West Indies team.
Mash, I'm going to put this to you because as harsh as it would sound, anyone in that batting lineup, we know Kirk McKenzie wasn't offered a central contract, so essentially he's almost playing like freelance. Can you see anyone in that top order, even a Tage, if they don't perform in Australia, as harsh as it sounds, facing a drop from the West Indies Test side?
What, for England by the time everybody else comes back?
Basically.
I think Kirk will be under the biggest risk. We don't know who's going to bat at 6. We're fairly certain that Kevem Hodge will bat at 4 or 5. We don't know who's going to bat at 6. I still haven't worked out if they're going to put Josh De Silva at 6 and then work out their order down from there, or if they put Justin Graves at 6, De Silva at 7, and then your bowlers from there. It's a weird one, Santoki, because Alec Athena's spot is secure no matter what. He's going to England no matter what. He's done enough across different formats to suggest he's got promise. Yeah. Kurt McKenzie, as we said many times on this show, shouldn't be in the Test squad at such a young age and he's been overexposed by being put in. But I'm about to give a caveat, right? So I'm about to say something totally reckless, Santoki, right? I'm going to go through our top 5 batters. Yeah, I'm just going to say the top 5 and give a reason why we may perform better than people expect, right? So starting with Craig and Tage. Craig scored a century last time out. He's our best bats. He's obdurate. If you take his stats since being West Indies captain, he's actually good. He averages in the mid-40s as West Indies captain. And if Craig is at his best, if he's at his drop anchor best, even Australia will struggle to get him away from the wicket, right? Tage also has that ability to play an innings like that. Now, to give Tage his due, Tage has shown the rest of the players the template from last season that Australia doesn't have to be a complete sink or swim situation, right? Tage played last year. He scored 150 and a couple of 40s, if I remember rightly, across the 2 Test matches, and that was on Test match debut. Now, the only concern for Tage is now Australia have seen him, right? They didn't really have much to go on when he turned up last year. And that's why I'm saying potentially Kurt McKenzie, Alec Athena's, and Kevem Hodge have an advantage because they're not known. There's not going to be tons of footage out there for Australia to scrutinize and say, that's where you bowl to Kurt McKenzie if you want to get him out. Because really and truly, Kurt McKenzie gets himself out. There'll be no footage to say bowl there and he's loose there and that's where he's going to get himself out. So Kirk and Alec and Kavem on one hand should be looking at the situation and saying, they don't know me. I've got a blank canvas here. I can literally make a name for myself. They should really be fearless in their approach to this tour. And particularly, Alec has shown fearless cricket in every single innings he's played thus far. And Kavem actually has an interesting backstory, because Kavem, as a youngster, was at the Darren Lehman Cricket Academy. So Australia's not alien to Kavem Hodge. And really and truly, Santoki, Kavem Hodge is probably now at the age of 29, which is the classic age to suddenly get into the West Indies team. Is probably looking at his career saying, I should have been here long before this. I should have made my West Indies debut a long time ago. Obviously bowled some left-arm darts as well. He did well in this year's 4-day championship. He was okay in South Africa. South Africa's a different place to go, is a difficult place to tour if you've never been there before. He was all right against South Africa A. So they're inexperienced, but they're not hopeless. Now, of course, Australia could make them look hopeless, but that's not necessarily going to be the players' faults, because they made Babar Azam look hopeless. Like, do you know what I mean? So they could look bad, but that might be because Australia are good rather than those players just being bad. That's my defense of them, Santoki. That's my strongest defense.
No, you make a very good point, though. I think I wrote this in my series kind of review of the Pakistan series, where I said there are so many teams, non-Indian teams, because India has won here back-to-back last 2 times, but who've come here and they've kind of lost the series before even throwing their first punch, right? They've not even pushed Australia. I think what Pakistan have shown is you can challenge Australia and you might still be beaten, but you saw the performances from the Australians. They pushed the Australians to bring out the best in them. Like even in that run chase in Melbourne, like Pat, every time there was a partnership and they'd seen off everyone else, and you saw Pat Cummins, you're like, here comes the Grinch. He's going to ruin the party. And he did. Like, he came in and broke the partnership in 2 balls or 3 balls. But they constantly pushed Australia to be at their best. Even on this tricky Sydney pitch, like Marnus Labuschagne and David Warner had to bat at their highest or highest skill level to get over the line. Last year, you saw against the West Indies, at times, Marnus and Steve Smith scored big runs. They weren't pushed. Like I said, they were facing, I'll never forget the whole press box, the whole media center, all 3 radio stations and 2 TV stations just slumped their shoulders when Craig Brathwaite started bowling in the first, I think, hour of play or something on day 1 after West Indies had won the toss and elected to field. So it felt a bit too easy. I think what Pakistan have shown is if you can kind of just make Australia come at you, which I think Craig Brathwaite and Tej Narayan did do, right? Like, they put on some opening partnerships and then they fell away. The West Indies batting lineup fell away. Some terrible bad shots I remember from Mayers and Bonner and everybody else. That led to that downfall. And all the injuries as well, right? Like poor Marquino Mindley having flown halfway around the world and then he gets injured in 3-4 balls. Everything that could go wrong, it felt like already went wrong last year. And I'm with you. These new guys, Athenaeus and Kavem Hodge, you're right, Darren Lehman Academy, that's part of my research. I did read that. And Kirk McKenzie, these guys, they could do a John Cena to Kurt Angle, right? When you were talking about their match, that's what I thought about. They can just walk in and say, and get the Australians to get, who are you? And start the ruthless aggression era for West Indies cricket. How cool would that be? But and it can happen, right? And we saw Hodge, yes, you could say he came and spent a couple of months in Australia, but that's what Amir Jamal did, right? He spent 1 season playing great cricket here, and it helped him. You could see that he was used to these conditions, and at least he could put on a show. So I think that's what it's going to be about. Nobody's talking about West Indies winning the series except the 3 of us, but even if you can just come here and make a name for yourself. You've been given this opportunity because the likes of Jason Holder and Kyle Mayers, who've turned their back on an Australia tour. Yes, they made Australia tours before. You would think that it comes with some prestige, right? Playing Test cricket at the Adelaide Oval, at the Gabba. They've said we've had enough. We've seen enough of it last year, so we don't want to anymore. So these guys who would have never dreamt of playing in Australia have just been handed this opportunity literally on a platter. So they can make the most of it, and Do what Tej Narayan did last year, make a name for yourself in that sense, and get Australia to beat you rather than just get beaten by some silly, stupid cricket, as we've seen so many teams do. And we saw a lot of that from the West Indian batters in particular last year.
Now, Mash, we've talked about before, Tevin Imlach and McCaskey, they're essentially been brought in as backup opener in McCaskey case, backup wicketkeeper for Imlach. So we don't think they'll play barring an injury. However, one uncapped player who we weren't surprised to see named is Kevin Sinclair. Now, Sinclair's coming off the back of the West Indies A series in South Africa. He scored an 80 not out to give West Indies A famous win. And then in the last match, he took a 5-for, hit a half century. And really, that's building on what he done for Guyana Harpy Eagles, where he scored with the bat, took wickets. I believe he even opened that at one point. So, Mash, Kevin Sinclair, someone who he's coming in off a run of good form, building up momentum, seems like a confident player, is young, a long-term prospect for West Indies. He could be a wild card, Mash, if he builds on that confidence against Australia. I don't know how effective his spin will be in terms of taking wickets, but I can imagine with the bat, we could see some good performances coming from Sinclair lower down the order.
Yeah, 100%. And this is why I'm skeptical about who's going to play 6, 7, and 8. Because Sinclair's batting is good enough. It may in the future even be good enough to play top 6. I mean, certainly in the South Africa A series, he batted at 7, and Josh, I think, batted 1 ahead of him. I feel they'll be tempted to try that. Now, Sinclair deserves his chance. There'll be many who will say, how did Rakeem Cornwall get dropped already? Because obviously Rakeem's last test was the India test and he had the chest infection and now he just dropped, right? But Sinclair deserves his chance. He was in that test squad for India, didn't play, has continued to play well in all formats of cricket that he's been picked for. So you could see a situation where Josh De Silva bats 6, Kevin Sinclair 7, and then Gudakesh Motie 8. Now, here's the problem, Santoki. I'm surprised you didn't mention Motie yet, because Motie is a multi-format match winner for the West Indies, and over the last year he has been exceptional in his bowl. He was what you could argue he was our best bowler in the recently completed white ball wins against England and so on and so forth. We saw him take 19 wickets against Zim earlier in the year. But here's the problem. And I don't know who wants to go first to answer this. In Australia, do you play your best bowlers, which in that case means Sinclair and Motie should both play? But everyone always says Australia is a graveyard for overseas spinners. But then I see Nathan Lyon take 1 million wickets every single time against teams at home. And I'm like, well, I'm not, of course, Nathan Lyon is a GOAT in Australian cricket, right? But what is the difference between Nathan Lyon, who admittedly is a GOAT, and Gudakesh Motie, who is a match winner for us and has proved it thus far in every condition he's played in, right? So I don't know if I buy this idea that you must play Pacers versus Australia just because it's in Australia. What are you saying about that argument, gentlemen?
I mean, at the Adelaide Oval, because it's a day test as well, we've gotten so used to playing day-night tests in Adelaide that we've kind of forgotten what day tests are like in Adelaide. And historically, it's not the SCG, it's not a pitch that favors the spinners. But as the test match progresses, spinners can come into their own. Nathan Lyon has a great record. I think you obviously just can't compare any spinner to Nathan Lyon and what he's done. Technically speaking, what he does as well, the overspin, the bounce he gets, and just the fact that his off break is better than any off break, statistically, that we've ever seen in the history of the game. So, when you speak of him being the GOAT, he's operating at that level. But you're completely right. I don't think you need to just because it's Australia, you play all your fast bowlers. Look, you go to the Gabba pink ball test. Maybe that makes sense if you go more pace friendly than spin. But as we saw with the Pakistan team as well, and in the past when India have done well here, they've done well here when Ashwin or Jadeja has done well. on the other side, and you have had your fast bowlers do well. And we've spoken about the unknowns of the West Indies, but in Kemar Roach and Alzarri Joseph, I know Kemar Roach this must be like his 19th tour of Australia or something. He always is around. He's just become better and better. And I thought I was a little disappointed with Kemar Roach last time around because I thought he started well, but then he just kind of fell away in that Perth Test match as well. So if him and Alzarri Joseph have really good series, and then you can have whoever. I mean, Shamar Joseph. Let's stick to Shamar Joseph because of the backstory, so it'll be easier for like us as well to like build him up. I saw a 30-minute interview with Akeem Jordan. Sounds like a lovely guy, but let's go with Shamar Joseph for our sake. And I haven't seen a lot of Shamar Joseph with the ball. I'll be very honest, but you have those three. You need a spinner who can, and what I've seen of Moti is he can attack and defend, and that's what you can do on these pitches where if you bowl stump to stump, they will come after you. The Australian batters would, especially if you're looking at like the Heads and Marshes of the world. And you can have someone who can like bowl long spells, block one end up, and then kind of let the fast bowlers rotate from the other end, and you can kind of keep Australia at bay. I think what teams, the successful teams, and we are not even talking about West Indies putting themselves in a position to win a test yet, but the successful teams are teams who are not allowed Australia to make 400. I mean, even the last two tests in Melbourne and Sydney, what happened was Australia didn't go past 350, and as a result, you're not playing catch up. I mean, you compare that to Perth, this series against Pakistan. Australia make over 400. That's how they like to play Test cricket, right? Bat first, make 420, and then the opposition is playing catch up, and you'll never get close enough. But when India won their two series here, especially the 2020-21 series, even when they were completely their bowling attack was much weaker than the West Indies bowling attack, right? That especially as that series progressed and you got to the Gabba. But the one thing they did well was they never let Australia go past 360. So which means that you're always in the game. So if one of your batters, and it's Test cricket, right? Whether it's a new guy like Athanaze or if it's say Tej Narayan Chandrapal who builds on what he learned from last year, and then you stay close, then you never know. Anything can happen, right? The weather can change. Who knows, right? If Australia at 4 for 16 and Mitchell Marsh gets dropped at first slip, that was Pakistan's test at that point to win. So that's how the West Indies team will have to look at it. And it's not. I don't think it's all doom and gloom yet. Maybe it will be once we see the first hour of play and we'll message each other on our group saying, "Oh, it is doom and gloom as we expected," but with 10 days still to go or a week still to go, I think we can still believe that it could still be a competitive series, closely contested. Maybe it's too early to say.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Barat, by saying anything can happen. Because I remember last year before the first test, me and Michelle were talking about Pace, Jaden Seals, we had Kemar Roach, and then Craig Brathwaite ended up being the leading wicket taker after that first test in Perth with his part-time spin. But Mash, Kemar Roach, 35 years old, this is going to be his last tour of Australia. He'll definitely feel like, especially after how last year went with the injury and everything, he'll definitely feel like he has a point to prove in Australia this time.
Yeah, and I think I agree with Barat. Barat made that point about he was disappointed with how Kemar kind of just faded away in the series. And Kemar's a clever bowler, right? He doesn't need pace, but I just wonder if in Australia you do need a bit more pace. You can't just bowl, because Jason Holder didn't have any success last year either. So I do just wonder, like, you look at your bowlers like your Kemar Roach or Jason Holder, who obviously isn't touring this year. You can't just bowl line and length outside of stump, because generally speaking, Aussie batters are just going to score 100 off that. Like, you can't bowl aiming to get a little bit of nibble off the seam and so on. So you might be able to get that in the first few overs, but that's not generally speaking how Australia how it plays in Australia. So I don't know if Kemar's role in this tour is to be like, I'll hold up an end, and Shamar Joseph and Alzarri Joseph, you'll bowl the heat to actually try and take wickets. I'll bowl the control. So it can be about role definition. He doesn't have to be there to necessarily be the leading wicket taker, but he can guide a highly inexperienced Shamar Joseph and Alzara Joseph isn't inexperienced, but you know what I mean in so much as guiding him about this is where I want you to bowl in the next over. I'll go for 2 point. I'll go for 3 and over, and you attack. If that makes sense. The only one thing I just wanted to check with you, Barat, is so Akeem Jordan is a swing bowler. He very much needs. If there is swing on offer, he is highly effective. So I just want to check with you. Do you think there is any of the venues will suit swing bowling? If it does, he may actually get picked. If it doesn't, he's not going to pick in any of these tests.
We're having a great season of Kookaburra balls. Like, we've had like a few summers where the ball just hasn't swung, right? Like, but we've seen so far in this test series that, and even last year, we've got a nice batch of balls going. So there is swing on offer. Mitchell Stark's been getting it to go. Even Josh Hazelwood has got a bit of shape early on, especially when it's been slightly cloudy. And it's a weird summer in Australia. We've not really had, we nearly on 9 January today. I'm sitting here. The sun's out here in the Adelaide Hills, but it's been a very cold summer. The summer's really not kicked on, especially in Adelaide. I mean, it'll get warm and muggy once we go to Brisbane, like it always does. So even here, we will have some cloud cover for most days of the test series. And I know cloud cover and swing, I know people will jump on me and say that has nothing to do with each other. But what I mean by that is there will be some mugginess where you will be able to swing the ball, and the ball is swinging. So if Akeem Jordan is that kind of bowler, maybe, and I don't know, is Shamar Joseph like out and out quick? Does he have a lot of pace about it? Okay, that's good to know.
He's just more your raw pace.
Right. Okay, cool. So I think, yeah, that could be a good mix if they want like someone to swing the ball. And I think you're right with Kemar Roach and his role as well. I mean, you can play that role. You can kind of block one end up. It depends on what's happening at the other end. If at the other end, the bowlers are just leaking boundaries, then they'll just play you out. And we saw that with Jason Holder last year, right? Like, he bowled economically like he always does. But as the day wore on, it wasn't good enough. Like, they could just climb on him, and once the Aussies got their eye in, they were just walking across the line using that lack of pace and whipping him through the onside or just sitting on him. So I think that's the thing with bowling that style. What happens at the other end? So Alzari Joseph for me has to have a great series, not just a good series like he did last year, a decent series. He really needs to bowl the house down. He needs that 6 for or like at least a 6 for to make an impression, so that the others can do what they do. Like you said, if Shamar Joseph is the raw quick, then it kind of helps him settle as well. Even if he's going at 4-0, or if he takes a couple of wickets, that helps. So in Australia, it has to be like the combined bowling effort, because we saw that with Pakistan. Every time they had one bowler bowling well, there was pressure released at the other end, and that just is not good enough. And you look at the teams that have won here: South Africa 3 times on the trot back in the 2000s, and India the last 2 times. They won, yes, their batters have scored runs, but it's mainly because their bowlers have just not let the Australians like slip away, and that's the only way to be competitive in Australia.
So Santolki, I'm going to come to you to kind of end this one, because I was having this discussion earlier today in another group I'm in. I said, what does success in Australia actually look like this time round? And my answer, and this sounds so weak, but I'm being realistic. My answer is, I just need to see us bowl South Australia out once in this series for less than 400 runs. And that sounds like such a low bar, but you have to understand that last time out, they were just making like 570 for 4. And you knew once Australia make that, the game is finished. Like, there is no game after that, right? So I would just ideally, similar to what Barat was getting at earlier on, there has to just be one innings I want to see on this tour where West Indies give it to Australia, and Australia makes significantly less than people would expect them to make against West Indies. And then even if West Indies then collapse, at least you can say, well, we were in the game. We were in the game. So what are you saying, Santolki? That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, you know what's going to happen though. Like the first day, Australia are going to bat. Shamar Joseph is going to get an early wicket, and we're all going to get excited. We're going to be like, oh, the West Indies are back. And then Australia will proceed to hit 550 for like 4 declared of the thing. So, but yeah, I'm with you, Mash. I think I'd love to see Australia bowled out for a competitive total, like 400 or under. That would be really, really good. And also, I'd love to see more players get like, big scores. You know, if someone can get a century, like Mackenzie can get a century or Athanaze, I think that would be really good. I think realistically, hoping for anything like a win, as much as I'd love it, is ambitious, borderline delusional. So I'd just love to see an improvement on what we done last year and just sort of build on what we have with this young squad we're taking to Australia. Barat, what would you like to see from a West Indies point of view on the series?
Oh, firstly, I wouldn't want someone being pulled out from great cricket in Sydney to come and be a substitute fielder. Like, don't forget that happened with Omar Phillips last time.
I forgot that happened, you know. I forgot that happened.
I don't want it to turn into an embarrassment. And, it's every time people talk about last year, they don't even remember the names of half the players. But it's about, I think that's the irony, right? They remember Omar Phillips' name over, say, was it Omar Phillips? It was Omar Phillips, wasn't it? Yeah. Over, like, some of the guys who did play that test match, like between Marquino Mindley and I'll tell you honestly, the only reason people remember Marquino Mindley's name is our dear friend Philip Spooner. I remember after the Perth test, the press conference was going on. Craig Brathwaite finished his press conference, and I don't even remember who got injured in the first test and they needed a replacement. Was it
Mayers? Was it Mayers or
it was a fast bowler?
So many people got injured. Or was it Anderson Phillips?
I think it was Anderson Phillips. I'm going to say. Or maybe Jaden Seals. And then I remember as Philip Spoons was just walking away, he said, "Oh, guys, there's an announcement. We have a fast bowler coming in because whoever's gotten injured." And we were like, who's coming? And he's like, Mindley. And then he just walked away. And it's become like a thing in Australia. Like, they just randomly look at each other, some journalists, and just go, Mindley. So that's one of the abiding memories of that summer, unfortunately. And Omar Phillips' feelings. I don't want that to happen. Like, let us have the best fielders out there. And Devon Thomas did a really good press conference. I remember it was a good press conference. Like, imagine those are the things you remember. Nothing that happened on the field. Yeah, I mean, Tej Narayan batted well. Craig Brathwaite made 100. So I think if we see the likes of Athanaze that everybody's talking up. I mean, Ashwin said what he's going to dominate the next 10 years of cricket. Carlos Brathwaite has said he's the future of West Indies cricket. So if he is the future of West Indies cricket, I want Athanaze to show us that the future is bright. Because if he has a poor series after being termed as the future of West Indies cricket, it tells you everything you need to know about the future of West Indies cricket, doesn't it? So it'll be good to see someone like Shamar Joseph, like whether he takes wickets or not, go beyond the narrative of like, he was a watchman and he was all of that. And similarly with these guys, that middle order, like we know what Brathwaite and Chanderpaul will do, having seen them last year. That middle order can click and, a couple of them put on a show. It's good. It's so heartening. Like even to see Pakistan, Amir Jamal and these guys do well, I think was heartening more than anything. So no embarrassments, no like substitute fielders who've flown out of Sydney. And similarly, like, let's talk more about what happens on the field than in press conferences. That will be my biggest takeaway. Look, if West Indies are winning, who better than me to be talking about it? And I will write a book. We will write a book together, the three of us.
Barat, just before Santoki wraps it up, just one last thing from me, because I'm wary that the West Indian fans in particular will want to know this. Obviously, the Cricket Australia 11 play West Indies tomorrow, and there'll be lots of West Indians like tuning in if there is visuals, but certainly looking at scorecards. Is there anybody on that Cricket Australia? I know Peter Hanscom's the captain, and obviously he's well known. He's well known to counter cricket fans here. But is there anybody in that Cricket Australia side that people should be paying attention to? Because your average West Indian will be like, surely we can be competitive against a Cricket Australia 11. And I'm saying, word of caution, there's probably some good players there. So is there anybody that we should be wary of vis-a-vis the Cricket Australia side?
Oh yeah, look, it's basically the players who don't have BBL contracts. So it's a lot of youngsters who have just kind of made their entry into domestic cricket. but also don't have a white ball reputation yet. That's why they are available. They've just picked amongst whoever's available of that mix. Look, Teague Wiley made a strong start to his Shield career last year. A lot of people in Australia feel he bats in the top order, that he will go on to play Test cricket. There are a few who've been around for a long time, like Hanscom and Harry Conway and those guys. Tim Ward's been a steady opener for a while for Tasmania in the last few years. There are a few debutants who really impressed, like Doug Warren and Jack Nisbet. So, and even Liam Haskett, I think, has started well. Another classic Western Australian cricketer. So there are some. It'll be a good match to watch, and I think it's on cricket.com.au. It should be. I don't know if there's a VPN issue with that, but it should be available. And the best part is you'll hear my dulcet tones calling everything, and and if you are tuning in, I'll give you guys a shout out for sure.
I was going to say, if we don't hear at least one Caribbean cricket podcast,
you will. Don't you worry. Like, this has been so informative for me. Like, this is a win-win for all of us, this episode. So there is something to look forward to from that team as well. Murray Goodwin's son's playing. I mean, if you're a cricket tragic, so that'll be something to look forward to. I mean, again, I don't know whether this is the playing 11 or not, but yeah. So there are some names you will be hearing of a lot more in the years to come. And it'll be a competitive game. I think the one good thing for West Indies is Karen Rolton is a very flat pitch. It's a road most times. So if you are a batter, it's a good pitch to. What you don't want is to collapse at the Karen Rolton over. That will really kill your confidence. So it's a pitch where you can actually get your eye in, get used to Australian conditions, sort of the Adelaide air as well. It's not too far from the Adelaide Oval. So if there is a collapse from a batting front in this match, watch out. That's not a very good sign, is all I'll say.
Listen, Santoki, I'll let you wrap this up.
Yeah, Barat, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll probably have to put a disclaimer on the video for anyone who's not a fan of obscure wrestling references to skip the first 10 minutes and then go from there. But we'll be sure to listen out or watch the stream of you commentating. And we're expecting, Barat, it's very important. You need to do a babyface promo, at least 5 minutes, promoting the Caribbean cricket podcast.
I will, don't you worry. Yeah.
And also, we look forward to reading your articles as the series unfolds. I'm sure it'll be on CrickBuzz, right? So,
yep.
We look forward to all of that. But once again, always a pleasure, Barat, for coming on.
Oh, always a pleasure, boys. Like, it's always, like I said at the start as well, wonderful to watch you guys grow and grow and grow. And I'm a big supporter of what you guys do. And I can't believe we missed out on meeting each other in the flesh in England. But it's good though. That's what it is, right? It'll build up and build up and build up, and then we'll meet each other, and it'll be very disappointing. But no, I'm just kidding. It'll be. I do look forward to this series. It's gonna be fun. Like, yeah, if you are a West Indian cricket fan, look, you have nothing to lose. At least it's not a tour where you have your same old Jason Holders and Kyle Mayers and all of them coming here with the hope of putting on a show. This is a bunch of new kids. So if anything, there's a lot to look forward to. Maybe a lot of them will just fall by the wayside. But even if one of them puts his hand up and makes a name for himself, I think West Indies are one.
Listen, Barat, thank you so much. Everyone, as usual, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. You can see the ticker tape below in terms of the handles and whatnot. And make sure if you don't already, I think the whole cricket world does. If you don't already, make sure you go follow Barat, because he will be covering the Australia-West Indies series for the duration. So you'll be able to get some inside information from Barat throughout the tour. So make sure you go follow his handles as well. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll have some more content coming. We've been the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and Bharat Sundaresan as well. Thank you very much.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules seem coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.